Oak Island Town Hall Council regular meeting, July 10th, 2018, is now called to order. I'd like to say welcome. Thanks for coming. This is going to be a little bit different kind of meeting than we usually have, and we voted or had a consensus last year of the council that every quarter or every 3 months or so we would have an open meeting to more on town hall style, very informal, and once we go through our presentations, Mr. Martin, and the other two things that are on the agenda, we will hold our questions till the end, and then I'll open the floor up to the public or the audience to ask any question they'd like on these subjects. And if you have another subject you'd like to make a statement or ask a question about, you're welcome to do so. We will that will last approximately about an hour, and you'll have 3 minutes, as you do, same as you do in public comments. At this time, I'd ask Councilman Baylock to give the invocation and Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Dear Heavenly Father, please bless us as we come together today to decide on issues for the betterment of our town. Give us the wisdom and the patience to go in the right direction. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Before we get started with the town hall meeting aspect of it, Mrs. Faulkner is here tonight, and she has a project that that the Beach Preservation Organization has taken on, and she's going to tell us a little bit about it.
Thank you very much for this special time on the council meeting. The mayor herself found out about a flash mob program that's going on the Outer Banks, in which people come together at a particular location and time and clean up the beach for only 5 minutes. She passed that along to us, and because we have such a wonderful infrastructure here with our Adopt a Beach Access parents, with the Beach Preservation Society, we have the ultimate opportunity to make people more aware of how the beach gets to be as clean as it is. And so we have set up every Wednesday morning for the rest of the summer at 9 a.m. I think we may have to change one of them for a tide issue, but every Wednesday morning at 9 a.m. we will be meeting at a different access with that Adopt a Beach parent as the host. And we will take whoever shows up. Age is not a factor, ability is not a factor. We'll put something in your hand to collect in and send you out for only 5 minutes of collecting. When we bring back all of the debris that we find, you may be surprised, but we'll talk about the issues that represents, and then send you off to remember not to put any more litter on the beach, but also to help others remember not to litter as well. So I've left the list of dates and locations over here on the wall, on the table, and I'll post one downstairs in the front hall as well. We basically are moving back and forth between the east and the west accesses. So tomorrow morning at 49 East is where you would need to show up at 9 o'clock and help us with this flash sweep, as we call it. If you're not available in the midweek period during the rest of the summer, our Saturday component of the International Coastal Cleanup is September 15th. That's all morning on Saturday, September 15th. So I hope you'll join us for that one. Thank you for anything you can do to help us keep our beach wonderful.
Thank you, Ms. Fortner. I will say that I have attended the first two, and the last one, what sticks out in my mind is in 5 minutes, about 15 people picked up 460 cigarette butts in 5 minutes in one block area. So it's really important, and it creates awareness. You will find it on our website. I'm assuming, Lisa, we can put the list and when the dates are. It's fun, it's meaningful, and we invite everyone that can to spread the word via their Facebook. Okay, at this time I'll move into the town hall meeting part of our agenda, and I'm going to introduce Mr. Johnny Martin of Moffett and Nichols, and he's going to tell you a little bit about an update on our beach nourishment master plan. Welcome, Johnny.
Thank you. Madam Mayor, I'm sorry. Before that, did you want to do approval of the agenda?
Oh, I'm sorry.
You're going to do that later after the presentation?
Yeah, let's do it after that part of it.
All right, so there's a lot of slides here. I know I've been told I need to get through this in 10 to 15 minutes, so I'll stick around for questions, answer as many as you'd like. So we got a lot of things going on, so I'm going to start with a summary of the ongoing efforts and then let you know where we're kind of going into the master plan and really talk about a lot of the work that we're getting ready to send out to have the geotechnical investigations done to find the material that we need for the 50-year project. So just real quickly, we're still doing a little bit of work on the emergency dune project, and what we're doing with that is some, at the end of the project, there was some requirements from the environmental agencies to do some biweekly color and temperature monitoring, and so we're continuing to do that through September 1. And just a plot to show you sort of those biweekly measurements. And of course, what they're concerned about here is just seeing, you know, how the area that where the material was placed, is it any different from some of the control sections of the beach. So we have some areas that where the monitors are within where material was placed as well as outside of it, and we're just going to be checking those as from a temperature and a color aspect, and we expect to kind of finish that in September. The Delta project, so the material that you see going on the extreme east end of the town right now was part of the harbor deepening project that we worked with you guys to make sure we could piggyback onto the core work that's ongoing. What we have here is just showing sort of the east end of town, and sort of the area in black is sort of what the Corps was saying is the base project, and the part in white is what the town gave the $3 million for to place additional material on the beach. So roughly what that's entailing is roughly about a 125-foot wide berm that's going out at around elevation 6, and then sort of on a 1 to 15 side slope. Just want to tell you that that's a pretty steep side slope, and for construction, and of course the waves are going to kind of rework that, and it's going to equilibrate a little bit and find a little bit more of a natural slope. So you will see that berm sort of flatten out a little bit, you know, as time goes on. This is sort of where they're at. We expect that they'll probably be done either this week or next week. So this is a map showing sort of where they're working now, sort of at the east end of town, and they only probably got, you know, roughly 1,000 feet or 1,500 feet of material left, or maybe about 2,000. So they're halfway through the part of the project that the town was paying for. Of course, it's coming out of the harbor channel itself, out of the Bald Head Reaches, so it's really nice material. You know, looks, the color's really good and everything else. So what we've gotten so far is we've asked for them to give us an update, because of course the town would like to know the volumes that we ended up paying for. So the base project is where they've given us at least some preliminary numbers so far, and so they were expecting to place roughly 163,000 yards in that area, and that's from town line to southeast 77th Street. But the initial estimates, and again, we haven't been able to confirm this because we don't have the data yet, but what they're telling us is that they've roughly placed 200,000 yards in that stretch. So that's in the base area. The Delta project area from 77th to 63rd, what was shown on the plans is to place about another 250,000 yards, and that's where the town, you know, paid the $3 million to place that material. So, you know, that is supposed to be finished probably sometime either end of this week or early next week. The FEMA Turtle Habitat Project, so what that entails is sort of the next part of the beach, going from east to west. The town was really fortunate through some efforts of David and Lisa and David to, you know, put that in as a request, and they were actually able to get it. We did not find out or get approval till late last year for that project, but what we were wanting to do is, I'm just going to jump around here a little bit, was that we wanted to have some discussions with the Corps and see if we could tie this on to the current project, because again, that would be really good material. We could put it on there pretty quickly. So we've been trying for a while to do that. Of course, what we were told at the end was that the Corps could not accept money from another federal agency, even though the town was putting it toward it. The fact that we would get FEMA reimbursement, they said currently that's not allowed. So now what we're going to be doing is we have to do that separate. And of course, we were wanting to, if they had not gotten good bids for the project they're doing now, we were going to raise it up a level and see if we could argue that a little bit more. But now that they got the good bid during the project, we're pretty much now going to have to do this as a separate project. And we're kind of, excuse me, putting a lot of our effort toward this because we want to make sure that we get this constructed next winter. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So essentially where that section is from the east section of town, really from 63rd Street almost to the pier, the Ocean Crest Pier. And I just want to show this plot because remember, when we do the monitoring each year, we're kind of measuring the health of the beach as far as this volume per linear foot. So we measure from the top of the dune out to the outer bar around -12 and sort of calculate how many cubic yards per linear foot of beach we have for that. And that's where this plot comes in, and you can sort of see this is moving from east to west along the town, and you can sort of see which areas have more material or more healthy, if you will, than others. So, of course, where the core project was already sort of in fairly decent shape, but there again, we're not going to have another opportunity for 9 years to get this kind of cost-effective material. So, it was worth it, especially for 10 or 11 bucks a yard, to try to maximize that. So, we're hopeful to place 40 to 50 additional cubic yards per foot here that'll raise this up. The turtle habitat you see is going in the area that's probably the most vulnerable of all the sections of town. So there again, we're going to be looking to try to maximize, and we're talking with the town now that I'll go over in a minute, but we're talking with the town to see if there's any additional funds that we could put toward this to sort of get this section of town at least up to where other areas are. The project budget for that, the authorization is roughly 800,000 yards, or $8 million, roughly 364,000 yards. Again, we're currently in discussions with the town to determine if we can, if there's any additional funding available. And again, we've just started these conversations because there again, it just has come down that we're going to have to do this on our own. We're not going to be able to piggyback it onto the core project. At least some initial discussions, the town is saying, or David and Lisa are saying that we're possibly will have maybe $1 to $2 million of additional funds that we could put toward it, and hopefully that could get us, an additional 150 to 200,000. So the plan will be, if we're all lucky and living right, that we can get roughly, 500,000 yards placed in this section. And then the overall goal would be is that then, leveraging, the federal funds and the FEMA funds here and building this section up, every bit that we do is going to lessen the amount we have to do for the town finance project that'll be coming online in a couple of years. So where we're looking at now for that project is the Central Reach area. While we're calling it the Central Reach area, this is the area that Holden Beach used for their project a year or so ago. We finally got all of their data in and have really been able to do an assessment of this site. The orange line shows the permitted area that they had done. They took roughly 1.5 million yards out of this area. We are estimating that there's currently within the area itself roughly 400 to 500,000 cubic yards. But there's this area, there's not like big deep pieces of sand here. It's pretty much 2 to 3 feet of sand over clay. So there's kind of pot marks of areas. So we're going to need to really expand this so that when we come back for the FEMA project that we have enough additional material so that a dredger is not going to think they have to get every bit of sand out of here and then really raise our unit prices. So that's our priority one for trying to get that done. And so we were hopeful that if we could tie it onto the other project that you guys wouldn't have to pay us to do this work and to do the other thing, but now we're going to have to come back with some work to kind of get this done. But the nice thing is that if we can get FEMA to help reimburse the material or reimburse the cost for this sand search, because they did in their estimate roughly have $800,000 for engineering and the geotechnical stuff. So we want to take advantage of that and get as much field work done as we can with that project. Lockwoods Folly, real quick. We are, our hot spot at the west end has sort of re-shown itself here. Of course, down at the west end, around the 60s block here. I'm just going to show some pictures. So we've been sort of monitoring this, and what we've seen is really the first 2 years it moved back roughly about 50 feet, and now it seems to accelerate it, and now it's getting back to probably the sandbags are getting ready to be shown up again. So we've been in discussions. Here's just an idea of the profile too as it's moving back, and it's probably about 20 feet away from where it was when the sandbags were put in place. So the potential Lockwoods Folly projects that are coming up, the town, under the contract with O'Brien Gear, is acquiring its own permit with the SDI-5, and we've been told that the permit's now complete, and they're in the process of getting that approved. We've had some discussions over the last couple of weeks with the Corps and the county about nearshore placements, and the town has asked that the next quarterly project be placed near the west end hotspot. So it's not actually placed on the beach. It's placed, there's a hole that's out there that kind of allows additional wave energy to come in. So that's roughly right now estimated to be about 6,000 cubic yards that could be dredged out. We've asked for a little bit more. And what pays for this, the town share would be roughly about $12,000 for this. Most of the funds come from the shallow draft fund, as well as the county would be putting money toward this project. We've also been asked, the AIWW crossing is coming up this fall. We've had an initial meeting with the county and the town of Holden Beach. I wish I could tell you that it's going to be an easy discussion to talk about how we're going to share sand out of Lockwoods Folly Inlet, but it's not going to be an easy discussion. So we've started those discussions. As you know, the Terminal Groin project, they've decided not to do that, so they're just going to even be more now dependent on this material coming out of the inlet. So anyway, that's gives you an update of the Lockwoods Folly projects. Now the master plan, again, we've broken up the beach in these different reaches. We're right now in the middle of a lot of the modeling and analysis in the initial preliminary study that we completed for you guys a couple of years ago. We were estimating roughly 2 to 3 million yards for an initial project and roughly 1 million every 6 years for maintenance, so roughly 10 to 15 million cubic yards, but that didn't include storms. So, once we include storms, that number will go up to 20 to 25 million cubic yards that we would need over the next 50 years. Of course, as I said before, the Delta project and the Turtle Habitat project, we're working those to hopefully reduce this number down, maybe by hopefully 1 million yards. If we're fortunate, we could drop this need by a third, but we may need to continue to build it in phases. And the modeling is currently underway to refine these estimates and make sure that this is correct and add the storm needs. But we're in the process right now beginning the field investigations, so the geotechnical vibrocoring, to find this material that we need to do it, as well as beginning some velocity studies of Lockwood Folly Inlet to develop an inlet maintenance plan. I'm just going to talk about Lockwoods Folly Inlet. So what you see here is some plots of where we've, for the last really 60 years, we've sort of digitized the inlet throats, the inlet shorelines, and what's happening with the eastern channel. And the whole process with that is to look and see, okay, is there a channel alignment where both sides, the shoulders of the inlet, are in relatively good shape, where it's not hurting Oak Island and it's not hurting Holden Beach? Because we know that any sort of management plan we come out with for Lockwoods Folly Inlet, there's going to be lots of discussions and agreements that have to be made with Holden Beach. So we're currently in the process of doing that analysis and looking at trends. And what we ultimately want to come up with is sort of this corridor. This is Bogue Inlet, where we've done something similar for Carteret County, but what we have done is sort of set this corridor where as long as the inlet is sort of within this corridor, it's okay. If it gets too close to one side or the other, then we do an inlet relocation project to put it back toward the middle. Of course, there's issues with Lockwoods Folly Inlet, with the cultural resources, with the shipwrecks that are out there that, will make this sort of challenging. We've started talking to a subcontractor to do these velocity studies, and what I mean by that is in order for us to get a sense of how this inlet behaves and how the sediment moves, we have to kind of get a feel for how the flows come in and split along the AIWW, along the eastern channel and this area. So this is all sort of building the base for when we start looking at different alternatives for Lockwoods Folly Inlet, that we have confidence that what we would be proposing would actually work and be the best option. So this is kind of the bar area designs that we're coming up with. So we have the inshore sediment sources with Yellow Banks, Eastern Channel, the AIWW Crossing, and Lockwoods Folly Inlet. These are the vibrocores that we're currently planning to take at Yellow Banks. Again, there was concerns, of course, when this site was used here back in the early 2000s, there was a lot of rock here. So we've been talking to some people about doing some ground penetrating radar to kind of see, because the one thing about a 3-inch vibrocore, when you push it down, unless you hit right on the rock, you can push it out of the way, so you're not going to see the rocks that much with vibrocore, so you need something else to kind of see what you're going to have. So we are going to be doing some ground penetrating radar to see if we can see if there's different layers of rock. It might be that we could sort of miss some of these things, but that's the plan for Yellow Banks. For Sheep's Island, Eastern Channel, and Lockwoods Folly Inlet, we have these vibrochores that'll be done. We're doing these for the Eastern Channel for the beach compatible portion of it, just to verify that there again the material this next time is also beach compatible. And if so, then hopefully we won't have to do that again. If 2 straight times it's beach compatible material, then the agency should have good confidence that it should refill with beach compatible material. You see here along Lockwoods Folly Inlet, we're kind of doing 3 different legs, a straight out leg, one to the west and one to the east, so that when we kind of come up with whatever the best option is, that we kind of know the material that we're going to be getting out of that. For the offshore sediment sources, there's another source that, in getting the information from Holden Beach, another area that they had sort of described was this area that's sort of right offshore the inlet, but a little bit to the east or the eastern edge of Holden Beach. So this is an area that we'll be looking at, and you see the vibrocores. And so each dot is where we'll actually do a vibrocore and take the sample, and then the red lines are we have to put a boat in the water, and they have to do sort of some ground penetrating sonar to kind of see what's happening in between these. The Central Reach project we already talked about, but I mean roughly this is going to be 63 vibrocores. Each one of these vibrocores costs about $5,000, so I mean you can see the kind of investment we're going to be making to find this material for the long-term use on the beach. This is the ODMDS. So what this is we are going to go out and look at some of the areas where material has been placed that has been disposed of from the Wilmington Harbor deepening. So we've been told that it's kind of a mixed bag out here, that they didn't really separate sand versus the river muds. But we at least want to verify that, so we're not going crazy out here with a lot. We'll do these, and if it proves that it is a mixed bag, then we'll cease operations. But if not, then we may look to expand if we actually find some good material out here. Jaybird Shoals, we're looking toward this western end of Jaybird Shoals, trying to see how much material we can get out of it. Of course, Bald Head has already done a lot of projects in this area, and really to come further into this area, there's a lot of agency concerns that we would have pretty dramatic effects on the shoreline at Caswell Beach. So we're kind of staying offshore with Jaybird. This is another area that we're looking at. This is sort of an overall plot of just if you want to see where Oak Island is and all the areas that we'll be poking holes and running these lines across. This is sort of an overall summary. And this is frying pan. So what we are showing here is roughly, this gray line here is a 3-mile line. So anything inside this 3-mile line is state waters. Anything outside of it is federal waters. And then you have to deal with BOEM, another agency, to get permission to utilize sand in this area. So we're concentrating our efforts within the state waters, but also doing some out around this area. Main reason being is that Bald Head has done some searches for utilizing this area, but they were kind of doing stuff near shore and cutting deeper areas, so that was denied. When we talked to the agencies about what may be looked upon more favorably is to use a hopper dredge and actually only do 2 to 4 foot cuts so that these shoals could recover in the interim more naturally. So what we're envisioning for frying pan shoals is sort of working in from the edge of these shoals and putting in shallower cuts that can then sort of recover and recharge themselves. So I know that's a lot of information, but you know the take-home messages are the east end and the Delta project should be done here in another week. We're going to really be concentrating our efforts now that we can't piggyback onto the core. The next big thing is making sure we're in line to have a project next winter for the FEMA turtle habitat, but then also getting all this field work done and begin the permitting for the other project that then we hope when we kind of figure out what these other two we're going to do and what we're kind of left with, then we'll have a clearer picture of what the first initial project for the town would be to take care of the rest of the beach. And hopefully we'll know that, you know, that picture will come into focus toward the end of this year as, you know, we kind of figure out what we can do for the FEMA habitat project, and as the sand source information starts coming in and we kind of start seeing where the material is going to be able to come from.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. We'll let you sit and wait until we get to the end, and then we'll open the floor up to any questions or comments from the public. Paid parking is more or less, there's no presentation. It's just you're here to make comments. We like to hear both sides of every issue. Feel free when we finish and call the public section of that of the meeting. Feel free to step to the microphone, give us your name, and we'll answer any questions that we're able to. Water and sewer rules, Mr. Kelly, I'm going to turn that over to you for comment.
Basically, what we were wanting to do is talk about we've changed the sewer district fee this year. And we have Katie Coleman and David Hatton here with us to talk about it. But basically, what we're doing is on the tax bill, you've been getting a sewer district fee. If you had a developed property, you were getting a credit. And undeveloped property, we're paying the sewer district fee.
Tell the public.
The sewer district fee. So what we have done this year, we have looked at it over the past, and we have established the sewer district fee now will be on the tax bill, but there will be no more credits for developed lots. The rates will have been reduced to reflect now the sewer district fee will be paid just like everybody else will be at one time when it goes out. The new sewer district fee is $601.78. So if you have any questions here in a few moments, we'll be glad to answer anything that you have. But basically, we have changed it where the developed properties no longer get credits on their rates. They pay a sewer district fee just like undeveloped lots. And everything that you pay is still all debt oriented because that's what the sewer district fee was established for. It does not pay for any operation or maintenance part of the system. It's all debt.
As it's always been.
The way it has always been.
Okay.
We'll be open for any questions later.
Okay, all righty. We don't have a list that's signed up on, do we, Lisa? Okay, David, you're going to be the microphone person.
Or are they going to come to the microphone for 3 minutes that you did it different, or how do you want to do it?
How would you guys like to do it? Would you like to sit where you're at and us bring you the microphone, or come to the podium? Okay, you got it. We're gonna go to them, because that's more like a town hall.
Lisa, you're not
Yes.
giving me minutes.
Yes.
What's easier for you, though?
As long as they state their name and address and spell the name if they can, that,
Sorry, Lisa, I should.
Where's mine?
Yeah. I think previous ones, we've always went to them as town hall meeting. If you have a question on any subject, even if it's not these particular three, just raise your hand and Mr. Kelly will come to you.
Thank you.
Name and address.
Mark Donovan. I live at 58th Street, 5526 East Beach. And I've noticed, just during the presentation about the beach replenishment, I was wondering, right now the beach replenishment is supposed to stop at about 63rd Street, which I think is where the new berm begins. And our beach right now at 58th Street, we're out there at high tide just now at 5:30. There is no beach at all. The high tide is actually on the berm, like a foot or two up. And we were wondering, is that, the beach renourishment, is that going to be extended down farther towards us? He's talking about all sorts of different
There's some
parts of the
confusion
project.
amongst what this is going on right now. Johnny, would you like to address that? It's actually a core dredging project. It's not our beach renourishment project.
Oh, okay.
So Johnny can maybe explain a little bit more where everybody can understand it.
Right, so yeah, the project's going on right now is the core harbor deepening project. And so, back when 2000, when they deepened it again, there was, since they were going to go deeper, there was a decision made by the Corps because of the potential effects of the harbor deepening project that they would put the material in the beach compatible portions either on Bald Head or on Castle Beach, Oak Island. And so the way it's worked so far is that 2 times it goes to Bald Head, and then the 3rd time it comes to Castle Beach, Oak Island. So they went through 1 cycle of that. The last time the material came this way was 2009. So they did another cycle. This is the end of the 2nd cycle. So what happened was when we talked to the Corps about the town being able to give funds to go a little bit further west than what they were currently doing. Because originally they were only going to go to 77th Street. We talked to them, and we were hopeful that at least originally it was going to go to 58th Street. That's what they told us they probably thought that they could reach to. The fact that in the interim that there was this decision for the town to get money from FEMA for the turtle habitat project that starts at 63rd and goes all the way to roughly the pier, the agencies in the Corps decided that they would cut this project off at 63rd Street. So that, we weren't really part of any of that discussion. That was just the discussion because it really wasn't our project. We were just, the town was giving money to sort of piggyback onto and get this, because the other reason that we did that was because normally these projects, you'll pay $3 to $4 million for mobilization of the dredge before it pumps the first grain of sand. So by the time you do a project yourself, you might be paying $15 to $20 per cubic yard, whereas with this project, since the mob was covered under the Corps' base project, we're only paying the extra amount, so we're getting it for roughly $10 to $11 a yard.
I guess what I was asking, you kept talking about an extension, more projects coming next winter. You're referring to winter of 2018-19?
Not this coming winter. It would be
So a
19
year and a
and
half.
20. Yes, sir.
Okay.
So that's when we're targeting to get from 63rd to the pier.
Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you.
And a lot of the public thinks we made that decision to do beach renourishment. The town had no say in when it was done. It was an emergency project by the Army Corps of Engineers. Any more questions on any subject? Lynn?
Hi, I'm Lynn McDowell, 6407 Tortoise Shell Court. And 2 questions. One about the beach renourishment, mainly the longer-term project that we're still trying to figure out. The project that was done from 58th Street going west to put the dune up during the past year, I think, along with a project maybe 2 years ago that rebuilt some dune. Both of those didn't seem terribly successful to a layperson, meaning that at least a third of the sand was very quickly washed away.
Right.
So my question is, in this longer-term plan that we're talking about, what, $40 million, what would be different? I understand the projects now are to do a berm, not a dune, which is considerably different, but I believe the long-term plan does include a dune, and I don't quite understand why we would pay more money to have it wash away.
Right. No, understood. So I think, Kyle, if you can, there you go. If you can, because I want to go back to a graphic here that I think will help. Sorry, it'll be here just a second, but a picture's always worth 1,000 words. Okay. So, one of the main reasons that these dune projects that we put in place, those were just stopgap emergency projects. And of course, FEMA will pay you, if you don't have an engineered beach, they will pay for you to put at least 6 cubic yards above the 5-year surge level. So it's not a lot of material. It's just something to help you until hopefully you can have enough material to go out and protect. So as you said, normally there's 2 things that are working to protect you during a storm. One is the dune, and the other is the berm here that I'll say here. One of the things that's really hurt Oak Island is the fact that there's really not a berm pretty much left. The beach is totally flattened. I mean, like you said, at high tide, it's beating against the end of this. In order for us to really have a full project, you need both. You need a dune for higher return period events, like higher storms, like a 25-year when the surge is going to come up over that berm. But for the day-to-day, the winter storms and things of that nature, you need this berm to push that out to where, you have sort of a recreational beach and you have some storm protection that's built up here. I mean, this elevation of the berm that they're building now is at elevation 6. High tide here is roughly around elevation 1.1. So you can see when they build this berm, you're actually building up about a 5-foot high sand and then going out and then sloping. So what will be different about the big master project is it will incorporate a berm as well and will, work to push that material or push the water line out to where we have additional protection and to where the berm or the dune is not being attacked. Because essentially what happens is if you don't have a berm, then it comes in and attacks the dune sloughs off, it drops, and then pretty much you don't have a dune, and it can overwash during even smaller events. So you really have to have both for storm protection. And so the issue is that Oak Island currently, for most of its area, doesn't have a berm. And these dunes that we've put in are just really stopgap storm protection measures. So ultimately, what will be different when we put the bigger project in is it will have both a dune and a berm to make sure that that does not happen.
Do you have any historical data about how quickly our berm did wash away, the fact that we're down to virtually none? How long did that take?
Well, the last time a really big project was done here was when the, was when the Harbor Deepening project was done in 2001. And at that point, in certain areas of the beach, you built out roughly 250 feet further than where the beach is now. I mean, we have some profiles in those areas where we can show that, and I've showed them at a couple of places here where it's actually receded back roughly 200 feet for where it was at that point. So roughly, during that time, now 17 years ago, when the harbor deepening was done, what was roughly placed on Oak Island's beaches was somewhere in the order of 4 to 5 million cubic yards that was placed. So if you just want to kind of use that math, that tells you how much you've lost over the 17 years that we've had. So we're trying to, now the other thing that we want to do when we build the initial project is we're going to build it out a little bit further than what we think we need, because then you want to have 6 years before you need to come back and do it again, because then we'll be in maintenance mode at that point.
Any more questions? I'm sorry.
Well, and so that, the design of that project is meaning that it won't all wash away in 20 years?
Well, what it is
Barring
that,
storms, I understand.
right. Well, I mean, so essentially what we'll be looking to do is we're going to come to you guys with some options about, okay, well, if you want to build to a 10-year storm or a 25-year storm, this is what you have to build, this is how much it's going to cost, this is how much the assessments are going to be. And really it'll come down to your guys' decision or the town's decision of what kind of level of risk do you want to live with, and versus how much you're having to pay. So, we'll come with those all too so that the town can make its informed decision about what that is. But what we will do, well, I shouldn't say this, but what I would hope would happen is that if the town decides to build this project, part of them getting their FEMA engineered beach, if that's what we end up going with, will be that you're maintaining it. So that then if you do have a named storm event, then possibly, hopefully, you would get paid for the material that's lost during that event.
Do I have time for one question?
We've trained you well. We have a certain, if you'll keep your questions to 1 and 3 minutes, and when you ask it, would be helpful. Thank you.
Great. My name's Lynn Gullidge. I reside at 126 Southwest 5th Street, and I'd like to bring the discussion back around to the sewer district fee, just kind of some points of clarification for all of us. So I understand that the credit will no longer be applied to the improved properties. So anybody that has a house, instead of getting the credit back, we're going to pay the, $601.78. Is that right?
Mr. Gill, who would be better to answer, you or Mr. Hatton?
Okay.
Okay.
So the question goes, then we're going to reduce the rate on the water bill. So do we know from a percent decrease what that is, or did the base units change? And I guess why the difference? I mean, is it really a fee? Is it an assessment? Is it an additional tax? Because I know as a real estate agent and selling properties, we need to properly disclose as well to our clients, both current and for new property owners, what they're getting into when they buy a property here in the area.
Sure.
Brian's going to answer some of that.
Well, I just, to address the question of what's the nature of it, it's a fee. By statute, it's a fee. It's not an assessment. But if you want to answer the questions about the differential, Dave, if you can, or David Hatton, if you can.
Well, basically what we did, we lowered the water and sewer rates about 35%. And we looked at it across the board to see what everybody had been paying before on the sewer district fee and the water rates. The sewer district fee was always established to pay debt. And what we did is we took it back out of the operation and maintenance charges and the rates and put it into the debt like they had designed it for before in the sewer district fee. And that's basically all we did, is we just put it back over where it should have been. Basically, that's it. It's always paid debt, and it will always pay debt, and that is all it can pay. And now it's out of the rates where it shows exactly where it goes. So if somebody wants to come up and say what the debt is for the next year, what the sewer district fee is basically already established.
Okay, one last question. What's the projection for the full payoff of that project and that debt?
He's going to Hatton.
I know a number, but he probably knows the right one.
2032 is when the last bond payment that we have pays off. After we, as you recall, we refinanced some of the bonds, and that obviously saved us a lot in interest, and then it also extended those bonds out for a couple of years. But 2032, we can all gather and burn the mortgage payments. And also, on a 4,000 gallon average user, what we did, after lowering the rates and then taking into consideration the sewer district fee, a person's going to save about $20. So instead of, in the past, you guys have gotten fairly numb to increase in your utilities over the years. This year, it's going to be a net savings around $20. So
Month? Is that a month?
A year.
For you?
for the year.
For a year.
Yep. I know it's not a big amount of money, but it's better than another increase.
In other words, instead of paying it every month with your water bill, you'll be paying it with your tax bill.
Hi, I'm Cheryl Cook, and I live at 4803 East Yacht Drive. I'm back to the beach nourishment.
Sure.
We've got all these estimates of what it could possibly cost for the whole shebang. The one thing I don't see, other than we've had one little percentage of money going toward this project, will not make a dent in it. When will we start making significant changes to fund this project that we all know we have to have for this island to continue to stay an island before it starts really disintegrating? I just don't see anything happening as fast as the need for this renourishment.
I don't know that that specific can be specifically answered because I'm not sure that there is a total plan in place until probably 2019
Well,
budget year.
and I'll speak to the subject. We reached out everywhere we could reach out trying to get money coming in here, from FEMA to state, and the town manager and all the staff have done a great job getting money coming in. Of course, it takes some of the burden off the taxpayers. But the reality is now coming to effect. That's why we opened the doors back up to look at the paid parking, to bring money in, to take some of that off the taxpayers, and also this pier project, vitalizing that and letting the money there go to pay for beach renourishment. The reality is I'm wanting the council here, starting January 1st, have a tax district set up so by next year the tax district will start working. And that will give people time to plan for what they want to do. If people rent houses, they're going to raise their rents. They'll have time to plan all that. They're going to do all that stuff. And then by December 31st, we have our money start coming in. And them tax districts I'd like to go through till it funds this beach and then them go away. And then utilize what we have, the paid parking and our pier project to pay for the maintenance of the sand. That's my vision. So,
and will the vision that you have be significant enough that, we all know the government is probably going to help us to some extent, but they're not going to help us to the dollar amount that is needed. And I just hope that, I know everybody's on fixed incomes and we all budget, but that there's a serious thought of putting money toward this beach.
I'm looking at us trying to raise around $10 million a year with the tax districts.
Thank you.
And just, Madam Mayor, to clarify, I believe Councilmember Weinkauf's referring, said tax district, you mean like
Sand district.
municipal service district?
Yes. Yeah. Or sand.
There's a legal significance to that. It's technically a municipal service district.
Municipal Service District.
Thank you very much.
Bob Carpenter, 126 Northeast 36th Street. Dave, you said we save $20 a year on our water bill? A year. But we're going to get a sewer district fee of $601, which is $50 a month. I don't know if I can afford that kind of savings. All right, but when I'm looking at the greater thing, it's like the people that don't pay the water bill, they get a cut in what they're paying for the sewer district fee. Those that pay it 12 months a year get an increase of $50 a month. That doesn't really make a lot of sense, and this is something maybe Brian would know better than I would, but if it's going to be the water bill, why not just add the sewer district fee to the monthly water bill so people know what's being paid on debt on their monthly water bill?
You lost me, Bob.
Well, we follow the...
Wait, who lost me?
You lost me.
Oh, I'm sorry. Which part?
You already pay the $50 a month toward the debt.
I get the sewer district fee, and then I get a credit for it. So I don't pay the sewer district fee.
You do.
We know you do.
I pay it in a water rate. Dave is saying my water rate's going to go down $20 a year. That's less than $2 a month.
Overall, not
Yes. Your water bill comes down and you're just billed at the end of the year, but that also came down to 601 when
Okay,
it's
so
spread out.
that $50 a month is also going to be coming off my water bill.
Yes.
Correct.
35%.
Okay, then I stand corrected.
I'm trying to cipher that math up here, and I'm thinking, wait a minute.
Madam Mayor, I hate to be, there's going to be minutes of this meeting,
Yeah.
so I hate to be a stickler on the detail. The gentleman's incorrect. They are already paying sewer district fee. It's just part of the service fee.
Correct. That's what I said to him, though.
Right. I just want to make sure the minutes have that. As you know, we just prevailed in a lawsuit over this that's on appeal, and details are important, especially at this time.
Thank you, Counselor.
Pam Johnson, 101 Northeast 28th Street. My question is, we know the beach is going to erode. There's nothing we can do to stop it. When are we going to look at our building and allowing people to build into the dunes, on the dunes, put pools in the dunes? And if their home washes away because they've been allowed to build where they are, why can't we get an ordinance that they cannot rebuild so that we can protect some of our environment?
The Fifth Amendment to the United States Constitution prohibits takings.
Yeah.
I mean,
We'll let you speak to that, Brian.
Well, it would depend on the nature of the lot after a storm, but no government entity can take private property without just compensation. That's under both the United States and North Carolina Constitution. So it would have to be on a property by property basis, and you have CAMA regs, which they'll tell you all about, that dictate essentially building envelopes like that. But you can't have a blanket rule that if your house was destroyed by a storm, you can't rebuild unless you're ready to write a bunch of checks to the homeowners.
So it's a legality.
Absolutely. I mean, think about it. If you own that property and it was buildable and the government said you couldn't, that's a textbook taking.
Yeah.
And if I'm not mistaken, Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't we adopt the ordinance that really put us some one of the toughest ordinances around on the East Coast for dunes and protecting them? Or did we not? I thought we passed that ordinance.
We've got a more stringent ordinance for dune protection.
For the second set, not the first.
Right.
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 Yes.
But again, that still allows a reasonable use of the property.
Right.
Yes.
But it's about as much protection as the town can mandate.
Yes.
Right.
Legally.
Jim Hambacker, 3702 East Dolphin. To the Sandman. Stupid question. Where does the sand go that we lose? It's going somewhere. Is it going down to another beach, Sunset Beach, or traveling someplace?
Sure, absolutely.
If he could say that definitively, he wouldn't be standing.
Well,
But go ahead,
grant me
Tom.
this, God knows. I don't know if I know exactly, but we kind of know the sand moves two ways. I'm just trying to get to a plot here. So essentially, as you guys know, waves are changing directions, all the time. And sometimes you'll go out here and it looks like the waves are breaking this way. Oops, sorry. Sorry, Kyle. We know that the waves are breaking and moving sand this way, and sometimes it's moving this way. Overall, based on modeling and what we've seen in the past, we think, or we know that material sort of moves from east to west along the beach. Now, not all of it does, because some of it goes onshore and offshore. So it's sort of a combination of onshore, offshore, and what we call longshore drift. So depending on the day, it could be going any sorts of direction, but the net is moving, the longshore net is moving from east to west. So, at some point when we come up with our plan, what we are envisioning is that the west end will not need as much material as some of these others, because material that we place here will ultimately end up here. And it's all about coming up with the most efficient way to place this material. But then again, storms come and then really can pull a lot of material offshore. If it's caught within the bar during the summer times, a lot of that material will come back a little bit if you have enough sand in the system. As sand-starved as Oak Island is now, we don't see a lot of recovery per se in the summertime, but just because there's not a lot of sand in the system.
Well, the rocks have disappeared, so that's good. I have another question. The sand districts that we're setting up, tax districts, I find it is not fair, and I don't know if they're in stone right now. If you spend $300,000 on a house and you're over here on the beach side of Davis Canal or something, and then you spend the exact same amount of money building a house and it's over towards the other side of the island, the tax difference between those two houses can be $100,000 or $150,000 difference. For the same house, the same square footage, the same amenities, size lot, everything the same. So you're being taxed greater because of the location of your house. So now when we go to assess sand tax, you're not going, okay, everybody pays an 5% from beach to the highest part of this island. Your, graduated tax by, I guess, closest to the ocean or closest to the beach. You have first row pays this, second row this, third row this, and then off island you're paying this. But there's already a differential tax rate, or that you're paying as a homeowner being closer to the beach. So you're putting a premium on where the house is for your base tax, and then you're saying, well, gee, we're going to put a graduated rate on how close you are. So it's almost like you're being penalized twice for the property that you have, and nobody has kind of addressed that. It's always been, well, you get better beach. Well, we're already paying more money to the city. And I don't understand how those two, if 5% all the way across the island, fine. Can somebody just give me a reason why you think it's fair?
I'd be happy to give you a comment. Let me begin by saying that I, for one, am impatient with our lack of urgency about this issue. And people are undoubtedly aware that we recently tried to increase the reservoir for sand by passing a 3-cent tax increase, and that was not supported. We're waiting for a master plan, and granted, the complexity of this is in some ways staggering. All that being said, the financing is yet to be determined, and there are competing ideas. And so this question of equity and burden and assignment and assessment is yet to be settled. I, for one, don't necessarily agree with my colleague, and I think there are differing ideas. There surely were differing proposals from the consultants that we spoke to the last 2 years. So I would say to you that's unsettled, and I hear your argument about equity. But, as the lady in the back said, at some point, whether it's 25 or 30 or 35, it's going to be an enormous tax question, and then we're going to need a mechanism that works, that's equitable, that's supported by the public, and that will deliver the funding so that the engineering will work. I know you don't. I'm just saying it's not a settled question yet. And thank you for raising that, but I don't think there's an answer yet.
Thanks, sir.
And also, as a former tax collector, a $600,000 valued house on Yacht Drive on the waterway and a $600,000 house on the beach side pays the same tax rate.
Ted Bodenschatz, 201 Ocean Drive. I'd like to comment and congratulate you all for at least opening the door on paid parking here. I think it's important from both the revenue that it would generate as well as the protection, hopefully, the right-of-way as far as parking all over God knows where and around the beach. And hopefully you'll come up with some parking ideas. I just want to rehash. I do a little newsletter called Spotlight on Paradise. And last year, I think it was in August of last year, I did a survey on paid parking. and I had about 320 responses. 80% of those responses came from Oak Island residents and property owners. Less than 25 of those were negative to paid parking. 80% plus felt that it was unfair to make the people on Oak Island do beach renourishment and maintenance without sharing that burden with the county and other people who come here and use the beach on a daily basis. And less than 30% felt that paid parking would have any negative impact on tourism. So I think that's money that we can't afford to leave on the table, and I think we need to go after that along with other sources of revenue, but this is one that is obviously right there in front of us, and we should move forward with it as rapidly as we can. Thank you.
Thank you. Obviously, that is one of those unturned stones that we're looking at to lessen the burden on the taxpayers when it is time to make assessments or raise the taxes or however the council at that time decides to handle the nourishment funding. But every dime that we can gather before then will be better for our citizens. Any more questions on any subject? Please keep it to 3 minutes.
Mary Ann Fox, 101 Northeast 51st Street. Do we know how you were thinking about paying for parking? Like, would there be meters? Has there been a discussion? Because I may have missed that. And the second question was, and maybe I'm incorrect, so I want to just mention, long time ago, at one point in time, when the houses were washed away by a storm, I thought Oak Island did not let you rebuild. And that's why I was confused when you said that you can't take away from people using property. But I thought years and years back, we've had property here for a long time, there was a storm and they cut off that building. And now all of a sudden, some of these places that couldn't build are now popping back up on the waterfront. So those were my two questions. Thank you.
Well, I can promise you, since I've been the town attorney, we've never had a blanket rule that you can't rebuild. However, after some storms, FEMA, if you participate in a federal program administered by FEMA, they'll relocate your property on a condition that you don't rebuild. Some of the FEMA flood policies won't allow, if you can't get insurance, you can't rebuild. There's all kind of factors that go in. There are a lot of conditions where you can't rebuild. My point was the town can't just pass an ordinance saying if your house is destroyed in a storm, that in and of itself means you can't rebuild. But that I don't know which storm it was. I don't recall that, ma'am. I've been here 15 years, 12 years.
Floyd. The town took over some of the property, and I'm just now seeing some of these houses come back up, and I'm like, oh my God.
I think you're referring to some of what you hear say, they say they were unrebuildable. A lot of realtors are familiar with that term. And Steve, you may can address that. And the reason you see them becoming buildable now is there's been a change in the environment, and the Dooms have built in certain, Jake, whoever, yeah. Maybe you can do a dumbed-down version of why that happened?
I believe the storm you're referring to was Floyd back in 1999, and there were state regulations that CAMA enforces, and DCM is the agency that regulates those rules. And after the storm, you have to have at least 60 feet from the first line of stable natural vegetation, and it wasn't there. So the CAMA regulations would not allow you to rebuild. But as the vegetation grows back, you could rebuild. But because we received a large-scale nourishment project in 2000, 2001, they did what's called a static vegetation line. And that's where you measured that 60 feet back from, regardless of how much vegetation grew seaward of that static line. Recently, back in 2016, the Coastal Resource Commission changed the rules to allow municipalities to create a development line. And the town of Oak Island pursued the development line, which took place of the static vegetation line. So basically what we did, we drew a hard line in the sand saying that this is the most seaward point that a structure can be built, the principal structure, the house. There are some exceptions for some things seaward of the development line. But to be able to build to that development line, you have to have at least 60 feet of stable natural vegetation seaward of it. So if you only got 40 feet seaward of that development line, you have to move back 20 feet to get that 60 feet from that vegetation. That's why you're seeing these properties being built again. The state realized that they were too restrictive and they lessened the rules. So as Brian has said on a couple of times tonight, that we can't do a takings.
And I think as far as paid parking, none of us wants to see parking meters up and down the beach. I think when we start interviewing these companies, we'll look for the best technology we can find to lessen that burden. And the whole idea behind it is if the residents in the island have the parking sticker, you can park anywhere you want to for free. So that's the whole idea behind it.
Yeah, it shouldn't affect your parking for your residents at all, and I don't think any of the council has ever considered that. And it will be the least invasive with the most modern technology.
Well, I think we should note that council unanimously agreed to explore paid parking again, and most of the systems now are completely digitalized. And I'm going to say what I've said many times. It's inevitable. It's necessary. First of all, from a traffic management point of view, protection of private property, we need a system-wide, island-wide view of how to manage this. And we obviously need a revenue stream, as many as we can get, for beach renourishment. So for all those reasons, we are reconsidering it. But it will be completely digital in most cases, perhaps a kiosk here or there, but
Yes, it's the revenue. And tourists, to be honest with you, are our economy, are our resource. You know, visitor park supported parking, as Councilman Bach has so wisely named it, is exactly what it is. And it will also, I think, improve the quality of the life of the people that live in those areas, because it's chaotic at any given time in the summertime, and it does interfere with a lot of the people that live there as permanent residents. Got a few, maybe 10 more minutes. David, does anybody have any quick question?
Pam Johnson again, 101 Northeast 28th. I do applaud the council on paid parking, and I hope that that is pursued wholeheartedly as a revenue source. It is much needed. My question is, there's a drug problem. We all know Brunswick County has a major drug problem. There are major drug dealers in Oak Island. And law enforcement officers that are on the street know this, but nothing is being done about these major players. And I mean Mexican cartel. They're bringing in Mexican cartel. And if I'm a law-abiding citizen and found that out and don't use drugs and then talk to law enforcement and they say, we've been told not to touch this group because we don't have the manpower nor the staff to do that. I think we've got infrastructure issues within the city because of that. I know, because I've raised in a law enforcement family, that you can call in outside agencies for support. And I am very disappointed when I learned that that came down. I don't know who from the top it was. Was it within the police force itself? Was it town council? But there is a major problem, and it needs to be addressed and stopped in the most efficient way that can be done.
Thank you for your comment. Anyone else?
Hi, I'm Jim Arner from 122 Northeast 34th Street. ever since we moved here, we've been hearing about beach renourishment, and it seems to me that the only solution anybody comes up with is just dumping more sand on the beach and stuff. And I've seen other parts of the world, other beaches and stuff that use different technologies and stuff. Has that ever been part of our plan or research to do, like jetties or whatever it takes to keep the sand from the lengthwise movement like you're talking about?
Right. So part of our, currently in North Carolina, there's a ban on hard structures except for terminal groins. And so a terminal groin is a short jetty, if you will. Difference between and you didn't expect you were going to get this sort of education tonight, but there's always this idea of what's the difference between a groin and a jetty. Well, really, it's the length. So a jetty goes out to deeper water so that you really don't have to worry so much about dredging. It's mainly for navigation, but that's a much longer structure to go out to the point where you're in deep water and you're outside the shoal system. A terminal groin is really a short structure that's kind of used to sort of interrupt a little bit and kind of hold the beach in place. Groins like you see in other parts of the world where they do it sort of along the beach, like a sawtooth pattern, those aren't allowed in North Carolina currently. You've seen them up in Norfolk, you've seen them in some other areas, but they're currently not allowed in North Carolina. And obviously, once you build one structure, you end up building a lot because, I don't want to say you're robbing Peter to pay Paul, but you're kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul because you're, capturing sand here that would have been here. So North Carolina will allow, and one of the things that we will be looking at as far as our master plan is there will be a study on does a terminal groin make sense at this area at the west end to kind of help capture that area. But, that's just in the beginning stages. But we will be looking at that as part of the master plan.
All right, one more question, and then we're going to go to the rest of our agenda. Anybody else? Okay, seeing no hands, we will go on to the approval of the agenda or any adjustments. Any council member have it?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, everyone.
I'd like to pull item number 2 from the consent agenda.
Item number 2.
Yes, ma'am.
Any further adjustments?
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
Jake has given us a final plat for Lucas Cove. I'd like to add that to the agenda for purposes of discussion and purposes to let Mr. Purser present so that council can ask any questions since he will not be here next month.
All right. I'll call for a motion to approve the amended agenda.
So moved.
Second, please.
Second.
All in favor? Thank you. This time I'll call for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
As amended.
As amended, sorry.
Second.
All in favor? Thank you. The first item on that was removed from the consent agenda was number 2, and that's the approval of amendments to section 1-7E, 28-10.1, 28-10.2, 28-10.3, 28-39 parking ordinances. And Mr. Bott, since you removed that, I'll let you lead the discussion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a question for Mr. Edwards. I'm on page 12, item E, which reads, all damage to the right-of-way shall be the sole responsibility of the general contractor to correct before a certificate of occupancy shall be issued. No portage-on required debris container shall be allowed in the right-of-way. Construction vehicles shall not be permitted to park in part or in whole on pavement. And my question goes to how this section would be enforced, Steve. And I have some personal experience having lived through this on my street. So it seems to me to be effective. We would need to have a pre and post construction measurement, photographic evidence, because I can assure you that the fissures in the street and the decay along the edge of the street into the right-of-way was caused by construction. It may have been ameliorated by throwing sand over it, but it's still damage to the street. And I'm wondering what ideas you might have about being more efficient in enforcing that, because I realize you have a lot of construction sites and a lot of permits that you're looking at. Is there a pre-construction process where the street is examined and certified?
Well, we put it on the contractors to report any damage, and then during the final, if we, well, you're laughing about that, but.
Pre-damage.
Pre-damage. If they notice any damage prior to the start of construction, and if they fail to report it on our final checklist, if we see damage that was not reported within 100 feet of that job site, we held the contractors responsible, and we held the CO. It's not so funny for the contractor now. But there needs to be more proactive, and now that we've got some additional zoning staff, and we're going out and looking at these projects with the development permit to see that they've got their silt fencing up and all that, we can start doing some examination on the road and note as to any damage. We do have it on our final checklist for zoning currently.
And I do appreciate that. My point in having this dialogue with you is to encourage you to explore being even more proficient in, because frankly, an honor system for contractors, I would prefer you take the photos and the measurements, and I'll rest a lot easier at night, and then we know what the street looks like versus what's reported.
Right. I agree with that. But if they don't report it, once there's several that do report the damage that they have before they start, and then we can document it that's been reported. But it weakens their defense that they didn't damage it if they don't report it.
How many, are you actually getting reports of damage from contractors prior to beginning?
Yes, sir. We have received that.
Because they don't want to be held responsible.
Yeah.
So you're verifying it.
But I did I did a broadcast back in 2013 on this, and then another one in 2014. Now, I haven't done it recently, but there are a few contractors out there that do call, and we do try and monitor it, and we'll note it during inspections and try to get them to repair. We'll debate them into repairing it. They can prove document-wise that it wasn't damaged by them. But we'll work on during the initial site visit of the development for the zoning technician to verify the roads within 100 feet of that property on both sides.
Thank you. I'd rather do that than wrangle on the back end of that when the damage is already in place, if it is. But thank you. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. I'm going to refer back to what the original, thank you, Councilman Bach, but the original discussion and why that was placed on the agenda was to utilize the civil patrol. We're changing the content of an ordinance, and it's utilizing a civil patrol to assist with parking enforcement was discussed during the budget process. We have been reviewing applications for part-time positions and are working to get this program up and running. There are a few ordinances which need to be amended to allow enforcement through a civil penalty, and those proposed ordinance amendments are attached. That's, would you like to speak to that as well? So the public
No, Mr. Edwards has very graciously answered my question.
Okay. At this time, I entertain a motion to approve that ordinance amendment.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve the amendments of Section 1-7, 128, as presented.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? All right, thank you. Ms. Bell, you had added to the agenda?
Jake, you're up, buddy.
This is a final plat for a major subdivision out by East Yacht Drive, Lucas Cove. They have prepared a final plat, and our ordinance stipulates that it has to come before council. They, on the sheet 5, it's all right there in front of you. They, one of the requirements of the final plat is that you show the data to reproduce the lines, and that's shown on sheet 5. They have also provided us with as-built surveys, so staff has that of the existing infrastructure. Once the final plat is adopted, it has to be recorded at the Register of Deeds. and they have 90 days to do so, and afterwards, they provide 3 copies of that to the town staff. And once the final plat is recorded, at that point, lots can be sold, and I would expect what would likely follow is buildings being permitted and beginning to be erected.
Okay.
So that's what this is.
Did you have some questions for Mr. Purser?
No,
Okay. Does anyone have any questions? Understanding Mr. Purser will not be here in August. This probably will go before vote. So is there any questions for Mr. Purser on what we've got here, the information in front of us?
I have a question for Jake. So, is this final plat totally consistent with the initial plat approved by council?
Correct. Final plats are supposed to mirror the preliminary plat. You don't have the preliminary plat recorded, but you do the final. Yes.
Mr. Purser, reference the foliage, no palm trees, is that correct?
We didn't tell him he couldn't have no.
Okay. That's an old thing we've been having going on for a long time. I told him it's called Oak Island for a reason. It's not called Palm Island, but anyway. I'm sorry, I couldn't help myself. How are you?
Minutes won't be able to reflect that he's joking.
It's an inside joke, I think. So-
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I make a motion to approve the final plat as submitted.
Do I have a second?
We can't approve it.
Oh, okay.
Not
That's
till
right.
August.
It's gotta be
We have to
45
defer it
days.
to the August meeting.
Right.
Move it to the August meeting, yeah.
Right.
I understand.
Well, if you have any other questions for him while he's here today.
That is correct, right, Jake? It's a 45-day waiting period once you get the plat?
I'm going by memory here, but yes. And that 45 days applies to several things, rezonings and tax amendments and all that kind of stuff. I try to typically work with people if there's time, then, I try to work with them rather than,
I asked that it be presented tonight because Mr. Purser is not going to be here, and I wanted an effort for us to have a chance to ask him any questions that we have.
So I'm presuming it will come to the August meeting in the consent agenda?
I can put it on that agenda.
Do you need a motion, Madam Mayor, to put it on the consent agenda for August?
We do?
That'd be helpful.
Entertain a motion.
I move that the,
Madam Mayor, Mr. Purser, I don't mean to interrupt you.
Mr. Purser, yes.
Would Jay be happy, or would he be satisfied if you voted on it tonight?
We can't vote on it tonight. We'd be in violation of our ordinance. Sorry. Okay.
All right, now I entertain a motion to put that on the August consent agenda.
Madam Mayor, I move that the final plat for Lucas Cove be placed on the consent agenda for the August meeting of Town Council.
Second, please.
Second.
All in favor? Unanimously, so thank you. Moving on to the administrative reports. Mr. Kelly, do you have anything to report tonight?
The pier project continues. They're getting ready to start working on the top, doing the handrail work on the outside. The pier house remodeling continues to be going on. 801, we've had the contractors come in and check the heating and air, plumbing and everything on that one. Going to be bringing a report back to you for that. The RFPs for the restaurant, we're hoping to have a draft to you out by the end of this week and have it sent out by the 20th of July. So we are moving forward on those projects, but that's it at this time.
All right, thank you. Mr. Eads?
No report, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. This time I entertain a motion to go into closed session.
So moved.
Second.
Do we need to state the, someone
You
needs
can
to
read it.
read it?
Please don't tell me it
John,
says.
would you
Just to clarify, that was to go into closed session to discuss land acquisition and pending litigation pursuant to NCGS 143-318, 11A, 3, and 5, correct?
Correct.
You making the motion?
I've been like that the whole time, sorry.
He's interning with y'all.
At this time, I'll call the Oak Island Town Hall meeting back to order, and there was some action taken in closed session. This time,
Actually, no,
There was not.
excuse me?
There's no action taken in closed session. We have something to do after closed session. Right, Lisa?
Correct.
Yes.
correct.
No, go ahead.
Bring the action
Okay.
for you now.
How do-
You're good.
Go,
not
Mr.
vote for closed session.
Councilman Scott.
Yes, ma'am. I'd like to make a motion.
Yes.
My motion is to authorize the town manager to make an offer to purchase 604 Ocean Drive for the amount of $710,000.
Second.
All in favor? Thank you. At this time, I entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor? Thank you.